everyone is different. You're having a really bad day and things don't look right. And you call the office and you say, I just don't know what to do anymore. I would tell you that that is not how it was meant to be. And it's not fair for you to go through life living a difficult life. But a lot of people that live in our parish don't realize that we're there, or don't know that you don't have to have insurance to go there. You can go there and we work strictly on your income. You could pay $2 to come in and see a doctor, to see a therapist. We have an anxiety group. We have a parenting group. You would be very comfortable being there. You can come in and we can talk to you and we can comfort you. We can be friends. We can understand. We can listen to what your problems are and what has caused you to feel the way that you feel. In the end, you would be very pleased that you ended up there. I've said it once before, but I'll say it again. It's more fulfilling than anything else that job could possibly give me, by seeing a patient or a child or an adult's life completely turned around. That's a good day. Hi, my name is Lisa Lopez, and I'm a nurse at the Ascension Counseling Center.
Hello everyone, I'm Lisa Weber Curry, Manager of Clinical Services at Ascension Counseling Center. You're watching Ascension Counseling Center's video newsletter, where we talk about the services we offer and how you can benefit from them. Thanks for joining us. In this episode, we'll talk about fighting fair to resolve conflict. What causes conflict? What kind of fighter are you? What are your options when nothing seems to work? We'll answer these questions and more during the next half hour or so. Please stay with us. Our newsletter begins right after this message.
Ascension Parish, a parish steeped in tradition. It's a place where generations of families have continued to enjoy a lifestyle that centers on community living and community celebration. It's a place where we care about each other and we care about ourselves. For more than 50 years, the Ascension Counseling Center has continued the tradition of helping individuals and families change behaviors and change lives. The Ascension Counseling Center.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us. Hello, Suzanne.
Hi, Lisa.
We're back again.
Yes, we are.
This time we're talking about something everyone experiences, conflict. Fighting to resolve conflict, and how can we do it successfully?
Yeah, and this is really important because, we have people who come to our agency all the time for anger management classes, for domestic violence classes, and what happened was they just got into an argument, a verbal altercation that got out of hand. And so it's very important that people learn how to fight. And even in relationships, in your own relationships, you know that you have times where you just get angry with the other person and you end up having a fight. And so we don't even pretend that there is no such thing as disagreements.
Right.
There's no such thing as fighting. But there is such a thing as doing it appropriately. And what happens, I notice with people, is we have the same argument every single time.
Yes.
What I always say is, you could just tape record one of those arguments and play it back instead of having it again,
Right.
because we each say the same thing, we just go around in the same circles, and we never resolve anything.
Right.
So what we're really talking about today is fighting in such a way that you resolve the conflict instead of having it continue to come up over and over
And
again.
especially the same conflict. I actually think if we played the tape recorder, it might make us laugh rather than argue. So I think, to resolve the conflict, first of all, we need to know what kind of fighter we are.
Yes, and there are different types of fighters, and so you might be somebody who avoids conflict at all costs. And so you might get angry or see the other person is angry, but you don't want to get involved with that. And so you just, for some people, they're afraid of anger.
Yes.
Anger equals rejection to them. And so they're afraid to say what their needs are. And that's basically what's happening. You're not saying what's important to you. You give up your own rights in the relationship. and the other person, if there's somebody who doesn't have a problem expressing their anger, then they just basically kind of roll all
Right.
over you.
Right.
So it's important to know if you're the kind of person who avoids conflict and won't say what you need.
Right, and then you end up blaming the other person because they're able to express what they need.
Yes,
So,
you
yeah.
feel like you've been treated unfairly.
Exactly.
There are other people that if there's any kind of disagreement or criticism, they take it personally, like it's an attack on them, instead of somebody saying, there's a problem that we both need to solve.
Right.
You take it as they're saying I'm the problem and I
Right.
need to change. And that's not really the case.
Okay.
People need to be able to take disagreements and feedback and not take it as a personal attack on them, but to
Right.
look at it as a problem that needs to be solved. And when I'm working with couples who are having disagreements, doing couples counseling, I always tell them, you know, the problem that brings them in is that they're facing each other and pointing at each other and saying, you're the problem.
Right.
And they're never going to resolve things until what they do is stand shoulder to shoulder and look at the issue and say, that's the problem,
Right.
and together we need to solve it.
Right, because no one wants to hear, I'm the problem, I'm the
Right.
problem. Immediately your defenses go up and there's no resolution there.
That's correct. All right, so there are people, when they're angry, they kind of hit below the belt. All right, so you know, when you live with somebody, we kind of know what their issues are and
Yeah.
what the buttons are.
Exactly.
And some people, instead of talking about the issue, they go immediately into attack mode,
Yeah.
and they kind of just push every button that their partner has.
Especially
And
those sensitive ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's sometimes what people will do when they're
Okay.
arguing. Some people feel out of control when there's an argument and they don't know what to do. They feel overwhelmed. They kind of shut down emotionally.
Yeah.
And then that prevents them from really discussing the issue and trying to resolve things in a healthy
Oftentimes they
way.
feel like it's going to get out of hand because it seems like it's out of control, and if I let it continue, it's going to get out of hand and we can't come back from this.
And yes, and then some people, what they do is just kind of withdraw and they become very, very silent. And this used to be me. If you knew me when I got really quiet, that was the warning sign that
Yeah.
something was not right for me.
Yeah.
And so some people really, they just withdraw, they get really silent, they don't say anything at all whenever they get angry
Okay.
because they just kind of shut down. Other people bring up everything that's happened in the past that's wrong. So instead of just focusing on whatever the issue is, they will just dump everything from the past
Yeah.
onto that other person. And so it really kind of muddies things up so that you're not really able to talk about the issue.
Yeah, it does. And I think people do that out of fear they're losing the fight. So if I'm losing a fight, let's bring up everything from the past you've done wrong in my eyes and give me an advantage. But it doesn't. It just hurts the fight and the relationship.
And then some people get very, very aggressive whenever there's a conflict. And that will also shut the other person down as
Right.
well. If they're, you know, we talk about the difference between just assertive communication, saying what plainly needs to be said,
Right.
but there's really aggressive where
Yeah.
you just get very belligerent. And so that will prevent communication going
Definitely.
both ways.
Okay. So we're going to talk about what causes all this conflict that happens in relationships. And we're not just talking about couples relationships. We're talking about friendships, other relationships in family, relationships on the job, relationships in clubs, organizations. Conflict can happen anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there's no way that we can live closely with other people and live for our whole life and never rub each other the wrong way.
Yeah, 'cause
It's
we're in
just
denial
going
then.
to happen.
Yes.
And so really it's when there's any kind of a difference of opinion or difference of feelings or interpreting things differently or seeing the need as being different. So
Right.
anytime like that, anything like that is going to trigger a conflict between people. And you're right, it could be in family of origin, it could be romantic relationships, but it can also be on the job, in a club, at a church.
Yeah.
You know, people just have different needs, or see the solution to the issue as being different.
Right.
And sometimes it depends on how firmly people believe that they're in the right or their idea is the best, you know, and so they sometimes don't want to let other people do things the way that they want to do it. So
Yeah.
and one of the things that we tell people is that you might get angry at something that someone else is doing, or you might get hurt or frustrated. But what I tell people is, look, if you're married, your spouse is not required to live their life in such a way that they never make you angry.
Right.
You know,
That's just not going to
yeah,
happen.
it's not. And so
Right.
we need to recognize that whoever we're in a relationship with, whether it's business or personal or whatever it is, they're not required to never make us angry.
Right. And it's not that they set out to make us angry, but people have to live their own lives. And when
Yes.
you're doing that, at some point in time, you're going to
There's
anger
gonna be
somebody.
some conflict.
Yes. Yeah, that's significant. And then I also think, just recognizing that anger is a secondary emotion, and people often don't think of it that way. So if you become angry at something someone has said or done that you perceive was something done wrong to you, that's coming from being hurt. You didn't just all of a sudden get angry. Either somebody said something or did something that hurt you. So I think people fail to realize the two dynamics that are working. Anger and hurt works hand in hand.
Yes. And, a lot of people will use the expression that other person pushed my buttons.
Yeah.
What I say to people is, well, but you have the button, see? And if you didn't have the button, it couldn't be pressed.
Exactly.
So it's very important for us to look at, if somebody does push our button, look at the button on ourselves. And you raising an excellent point, and that is that, we often believe that anger is the second emotion that happens. And if we stay in the anger, we're going to have a different response to people.
Exactly.
But often the initial, first immediate emotional response is something different. It's hurt or
Right.
rejection or frustration
Yes.
or intolerance or something
Right.
else, or where we feel like we've been treated unfairly. And then we get angry. So we encourage people, after that anger has calmed down,
Yes.
to look beyond or before the anger and see if they can figure out what other emotion. Because if you feel rejected by someone and that makes you angry, then it's the rejection that needs to be looked at to
And
help you
addressed.
figure out
Right.
why do you feel rejected.
Exactly. But anger comes so quickly, people go with the anger.
Yes.
And so it's just better not to even respond when you're angry. Sometimes when you're angry, just take a few seconds, get by yourself and process that anger.
Somebody told me they got angry with their spouse because they were holding them up and they had a really, really very important meeting to go to. And so part of that, what was under there was some fearfulness of the negative consequences of if he missed that meeting.
Right.
So then he got angry. So it wasn't so much the anger, but what was underneath it was the fearfulness of the negative consequences. And then he got angry. So being able to look at your fearfulness of those negative consequences is really important, because if you don't, you'll have that response every single time.
Exactly. And if you can look at it, then you can say to your spouse, here's what's going on right now. If I don't make this meeting in a timely manner, there are consequences. I can lose my job. I can lose a contract. If you can say that to your spouse, then they can understand. They can see it from your perspective and get a move on.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about fighting fair to the rescue. What does
Okay.
that mean?
Well, what we're going to talk about is that whenever you fight fair, you're opening the lines of communication to each other.
Okay.
You're having your disagreement, and you air it all out.
Okay.
So you both get to say what you need to say. If you're not fighting fair, then things get really clouded. And we'll talk about some ground rules for fighting fair, and I think that'll
Okay.
clear things up a little bit
Okay.
for people. But the fair fighting is a way to actually resolve the conflicts that you're having, and that's why we encourage people to do it.
Yeah.
If you're an avoider and you avoid it, you're going to have all those hurt feelings,
Yes.
and you're not going to ever resolve that issue. It's going to keep coming up because you never address it.
Yeah.
If you're aggressive, then you're not going to resolve the issue because the other person is probably going to back down, or else it'll just escalate to the point where it becomes physical. Then you're going to be in our anger management group.
Exactly.
You know,
Yes.
sit
Yeah.
there by the court. And so you really need to
Exactly.
be able to fight fair so that
Definitely.
the goal is to actually resolve the issue instead of just covering it up.
Right. And it's really tough when you have two very aggressive fighters.
Yes.
Yeah. So learning how to balance it all and learning the difference between being aggressive and being assertive. Assertive comes with, I'm looking for a resolution. I'm trying to express to you how I'm feeling. I want to understand your perspective on this. Aggressive is, look, this is the way it is. This is how I see it. And it leaves no room
this
for
is what you're
negotiation.
doing. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, so we want to make sure people understand the difference. Okay, so let's talk about the ground rules for fighting fairly.
Well, the first one is stay calm.
Okay.
Don't panic.
Yeah.
So you need to stay calm,
Okay.
and recognizing that you know, when something happens, we have a tendency to overreact, and our emotions go really high really quickly.
Yeah.
Now, it's very difficult to follow any of these guidelines whenever your emotions are very intense. And what we know, the way the brain works, is that the more emotional we are, the higher the emotion gets, the smaller the thinking
The
part,
rational
part
thinking.
of our brain gets.
Exactly.
And so they kind of, the higher the emotion, it's kind of like a seesaw, you know. The higher the emotion, the lower the rational thinking,
Yeah.
decision-making part is. And so there's no way you're going to come up with a good, fair solution to an argument if you're emotional. And, you know, sometimes people will say, but I have to address it right now because this is when it's going on. But no, you really don't. What you can say is, you know, we're both really emotional right now.
Yes.
This is important. We need to address it. Let's give ourselves an hour, and then we'll come back and talk about it when we're
Exactly.
calm.
Exactly.
And so you don't have to address it. You can come back
Yeah,
later.
and essentially you have addressed it by saying now is not the time. It's not a safe time for either of us to address it then. And as you talk about that, I immediately think the other component to that is not engaging with individuals who will make you more emotional about the situation. You have to selectively choose who you can say, hey, this happened. Can I get some feedback on it? And that person needs to be a calm person, or get still and be calm yourself, because oftentimes folks will do the opposite. They will engage in people who will say, yes, man, you need to go right now. You need to go, and put them in check, and that's just not the right time. So.
Yeah. The other one is to express your feelings in words and not actions. You know, you need to make sure that if you're getting angry and upset, that you're going to be calm enough. Some people will do some things like, you know, I mean, people who come to the anger management or the divorce, domestic violence group, you know, they lay their hands on somebody.
Right.
And so we really need to make sure. And the other thing is, it's not even just like hitting somebody else, but almost everybody who comes to that group, they threw their phone and broke it. They hit their
was just thinking
television.
that, yes.
And, you know, they broke their television. There's some people that they have to do something physical.
Or they
before
break their hands punching a wall.
That's right. And so we're not talking about, you need to find a way to get rid of your emotion, intense emotions like anger, without doing something physical.
Right.
Never put your hands on somebody else.
Never.
And you know, we have so many people who come in and they have, you know, they've been through the court, so they have all the court fees.
Right.
They have to replace their television. They have to buy a new
Yes,
phone.
which
I mean,
isn't
there's
cheap.
a lot of consequences to those types of things. So
Yeah.
words and not actions.
Right.
Whenever
or
you're
if
upset.
they feel like they need to do something physical, go and run, take a walk. Those are safe things to do.
Those are safe things to do. The next one is be specific about what's bothering you. And so a lot of times we'll start an argument with somebody, and they don't even know what we're talking about.
Yes, I've
So,
seen that
yeah,
a lot.
so
yeah.
we need to be very clear and say the first thing out of our mouth what it is that we're talking about. So in other words, when you come home late from work and don't call me to let me know, then dinner is ruined.
Right. Yeah.
And so you need to be very specific about what it is that you're talking about so that everybody's on the same page.
Right. Good. Good. Okay. And then that one that we all can be guilty of, dealing with one issue at a time.
One issue at a time. So what'll happen is, as we're talking about fair fighting is, you'll bring up that issue, you might say, when you come home late from work and don't call me to let me know that you're going to be late, it makes a problem for us having dinner as a family, and dinner is ruined. The other person will attack
Right.
and say, well, but what about you? You don't even have dinner on the table every night,
Right.
and you're not even home sometimes when I come home, and the kids haven't finished their homework, and so you just
left
go
the
into
car
all
without
these,
gas, so I had
yeah,
to stop and get gas before I could come home.
Absolutely.
Just a whole bunch of
so
other
they'll
stuff.
so they'll bring up all the other stuff. They'll bring up everything that you've done to hurt them in the
Right.
past. What about that time? So you just bring up everything. And what you're bringing up are the unresolved issues that you've never solved in the past.
Right.
So the
That's
rule
very
is
important.
one thing on the table at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking with somebody and they say, well, what about this? You say to them, you know what? That's an issue that we need to address as well, but
Right.
that's not what we're talking about right now. Right now, what's on the table is when you come home late from work and don't call me to let me know,
Right.
it causes a problem in the family.
Mhm.
And so always keeping it one issue at a time.
Right. And then it makes it easier to resolve it if you're facing one issue at a time.
Because you'll end up talking about the second issue that gets thrown on the table, and you won't even address the first one. You've gone off on a
Exactly.
tangent now. And so that's why all of these things keep coming back up. You keep introducing other topics so
Yeah.
that nothing ever gets resolved.
Yeah. And if you don't feel any sense of accomplishment, eventually that leads to resentment. Why are we arguing? This happens every time. We walk away, nothing's resolved. So resolving it one problem at a time can really be beneficial
Yes.
for relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we talk about hitting below the belt.
Yes, and we know the things that our partner is sensitive about, or their woundedness from their childhood,
Right.
or woundedness from other relationships, and sometimes we'll use that to hurt the other person, to put them on defensive, and
Right.
and so that we can gain the upper hand.
Right.
So that's something that we never want to do. Intentionally wounding your partner is just inexcusable.
It is.
Damages your relationship, and
Yeah.
it doesn't help to solve
At
the
all.
issue.
And nobody wins. Nobody wins. Because now you've got a hurt partner that will not trust you to talk about the issues, because later on you're going to come back and say something that really hurts them. And then you're thinking, I want to work on this now and I'm sorry, but that partner isn't ready to even forgive you at that point. I just think hitting below the belt in any type of relationship is just so unhealthy, and it's one of those things that it's really hard to come back from.
It is, because you really can't take those words back.
Right.
And your partner knows that you know that that's an issue. So now they know that you've done that intentionally to hurt them.
Yeah.
And so once that happens, the other person is going to shut down, and you won't resolve the conflict that's on the table.
Not at all. And it just makes me think, I think we all grew up singing that song, Sticks and Stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words actually carry more weight.
They do.
Because if we recover from the sticks and stones that were thrown at us, we're still hurting and hear from the words.
Yeah.
So yeah, people need to remember that.
That's a no-go.
Yes, definitely.
Hitting below the belt, no.
Okay, what about avoiding accusations? Tell us
Well,
about that.
I think whenever you're accusing people of something, you kind of take the focus off of the problem and put it onto the person, and you begin to kind of attack them. And I think what this does is it makes the other person try to defend themselves.
Right.
And they feel misunderstood. They don't feel like they've been
Right.
understood if you're making accusations.
Right.
And you know, most of us, whenever somebody says or does something, we assume the motive for why they did that, you know. And usually that's not really the case.
Right.
So if we're making accusations such as, you know, you always do this, or you're saying this because you're really selfish, or you just want me to
Right.
prove how much I love you, or something along that line, then you're really covering up over the issue, and you're
Right.
just putting that person on the defensive. You're assuming you know what's going on the inside of that person, and really you don't.
Right. And it's just as easy to just say, what's going on? You know, this is what it looks like, but I'm sure, you know, that's not the case. So can you explain it to me? That will prevent that person from going on a defense, and that individual will be ready to say, oh, I'm so sorry you thought that, because here's what was going on. So it's just important to just ask. It's just that much easier. What's going on, instead of making an accusation.
Yeah, and if we use like the example of the person who had to get to the meeting, and you know, he's saying hurry, 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 and the spouse is thinking you're just controlling.
Right.
That's going to give you one response. But if you're thinking, oh, he's fearful, that's going to give you a whole different response.
It will.
And so how we, you know, if we're assuming we know what the other person is being motivated by, and we accuse them of being controlling when they're actually being fearful,
Yeah.
then we have cut down communication, and we have prevented ourselves from understanding what the other person is going
Right.
through.
Exactly, and created other problems. And it would just be as easy to say, wait a minute, why did you all of a sudden get so angry? And then he can say, well, it's because you have me running late, and here are the consequences. So it will work better to just find out what's
Yes.
going on. Okay. Generalizing. Wow. I've heard this in arguments from, I immediately thought about my husband, because if there's a disagreement about one thing, he will immediately generalize it to something else, and I have to remind him, we're talking about this one thing. It does not apply to this, that, or the other, so stay on topic with this one thing.
Yes, and so, you know, usually people will say things like, you know, you never think about me,
Yes.
or you always do this. It
Yes.
just makes me so mad.
Those are the killer words.
Yes.
Never and always, or you should have done this. Or, yeah.
And so, yeah, whenever we feel like somebody is, you know, like taking this issue and saying, well, you know, I'm not just talking about this time, I'm talking about every day, you
Right.
know, all the time you do this,
Yeah.
then it really prevents us from talking about the issue that's on
At
the
hand.
table.
Yeah, and because immediately you think, well, how can I go back and address this, that, and that? We're only talking about this moment. But what I found that breaks the ice is I'll say to my husband, really? You're talking about that, and that? Really? Really? That thing? What about right now? And then he'll look at me and say, you're really saying that I always do this or I never do this? And he'll put his head down, then he'll laugh, because he'll realize that's really ridiculous. This person doesn't always do this, you know. So sometimes just finding those little icebreakers, and again, remaining calm yourself.
And you know, even if we are talking about something that somebody else does frequently, like there are people who are always late
Yeah.
for everything they go to, work, church, family gatherings. And even if so let's say you're going over to your parents' house for Christmas and your spouse is late again, you still are going to just talk about, you know, right now. When we're late right now going to the family's house,
Right.
it makes me feel like the family is not important to you.
Yes.
And so you're still going to talk about that issue. Now, you might talk about it again on Sunday when they're late for church. Whenever you're late for church, it makes me feel, you know, and so we're going to address it every time it comes up. But still avoiding saying you're always late.
Right. Right.
You know, because you'll start, what'll happen is that person will get defensive, and they'll start pulling out instances when they weren't late, and just to disprove what you're
Right,
saying.
exactly.
So it kind
And
of clouds the
yeah.
issue.
And it becomes a fruitless argument back and forth. But I think it would work a whole lot better if in each instance, because then that person becomes keenly aware of what you're saying and you have concrete examples every time it happens. Yeah. And it makes them more likely to change. Yeah. Okay. So what about avoiding make-believing? What is that about?
Well, sometimes people will exaggerate what's going on.
Okay.
Or sometimes they'll even be angry about something and invent a complaint that's not related.
Yeah.
Like they're just mad and they want to have
So
a
they
fight.
add on.
Yes, they add on, they exaggerate, they kind of invent something, or they act like their feelings or emotions are more intense. I'm so hurt. I'm
Yeah.
so angry. When
Yeah.
really they're not, but they want to kind of like use that as stressing how important it is. So we really just need to stick to the facts, what's going on, and our honest feelings about
Exactly.
it.
I call that storing up so you can have an advantage. You know, you say, oh, this really bothered me, it really hurt me. The other person starts to feel badly about it and you get the upper hand. Just be honest. Just like you said, it's just the best thing because people will have more respect for you and they'll care more about your feelings when you're honest.
And all you have to do is ask for something because you want it.
Right.
You don't have to be angry
Yeah,
or
exactly.
make it a big thing. It just, you want it.
Yeah, that's
So-
it. And who knows, the other person may say, okay, thanks for letting me know. Here it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes, once again, we make things more difficult
Than
than
they
what
need
they
to
have to
be.
be. Yeah. So, and that kind of goes into what we were just talking about. Don't stockpile, you know.
Yes. Sometimes people will, you know, especially if you're the kind of person who avoids conflict, you'll just pile things up and pile things up. And some people don't feel comfortable expressing their wants or needs until they're angry. And I've
Right.
known people like that. They would have to kind of make themselves angry before they would
Right.
say what they needed or ask
Because
for
they're
what
not
they wanted.
comfortable dealing with conflict. So, yeah, they wait until it builds up and just let it explode.
But people will say, well, why didn't you just tell me this when it happened,
Right.
you know? And so it's really hard to go back and address really old things. And so sometimes people will have arguments and, you know, it might be 2, 3, 4 years old. And who can remember who said
That's
what at
what
that
I'm
point?
thinking. Look, I don't even remember. If you said I did it, here's the thing. I'm so sorry because you really don't remember that far
Yeah,
back.
and so holding things like that, first of all, it's just hard to recreate what happened and really resolve it. But, you know, it just has so many things piled up that
Yeah.
you just have to wade through it. And if we go back to that one issue at a time, you know,
We're never moving forward.
we really are not if we
No.
have a lot of issues on the table.
Yeah. And then it leads to the stockpilers. It's also a part of clamming up. You know, you don't say anything then and you let it all build up.
And you know, I had a client one time, and he was having a problem with his girlfriend, and we talked for a lot of times about what he would like to say to her and how we would process it. And he brought her into the session, and he wouldn't say a word to her. You know,
Yeah.
like giving her the silent treatment. So if you're doing the silent treatment thing, you know, you're never going to get anything resolved. And sometimes that silent treatment, the clamming up, is kind of an aggressive thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I
Yeah.
dare you to make me talk. I dare you to solve this. You know?
Right,
And so you
exactly.
really have to be, sometimes it's kind of an aggressive thing. Sometimes it's a self-protective thing. We feel scared to
Right.
share. But you're not going to be able to have any kind of a discussion that resolves anything if you just clam up. And
Right.
I've advised people, you know what, if, you know, most of us can think through what we want to say and it sounds great in our heads.
Yeah.
But when it's time to say it, we get tongue-tied. Write it
Yeah.
out.
Exactly.
If you need to. Write it out.
That
and
is a
then
form of
read it.
communication.
Yes, read
Yeah,
it to the other person
definitely.
so that you don't, and that's totally fine to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great option because a lot of people do get tongue-tied or you're afraid you're going to say the wrong thing. Well, you've already scripted, so just read it.
Just read it.
It works as well. So having all these rules, as you call them, common ground rules. We need to establish these things actually before these relationships. When we're getting into them, we need to establish rules about how we're going to communicate and include conflict, because so many people think conflict is a dirty word.
Yes, but
Yeah.
people need to agree how they're going to handle conflict and those kind of discussions, especially if you're the kind of person who avoids, or if you get really angry and then you kind of don't make good decisions or
Right.
say mean things. You need to really discuss in advance how you're going to have these discussions, not making this decision whenever you're angry. But
Right.
for instance, so we have people in our domestic violence class and they'll say, you know, I was really angry, we were both really angry, and I tried walking away and the other person followed me and wouldn't
Right.
let me walk away. And so those are the kind of things that need to be decided. When one of us decides or realizes that we're both losing it, you need to give us a signal. It could be time out,
Right.
whatever you agree on. We both need to walk away and go someplace and calm down.
Right.
So just kind of ground rules about how you're going to handle your arguments. Some people kind of have this like serial argument. Like they get together and they say one thing and then you need to walk away and process it and then come back and talk about it some more.
Yeah.
Share something else, need to walk away and process it, you know,
Yeah.
because you need to understand your fighting style, or if you need a lot of time to process things, or if you don't, all of those things you need to know about yourself, and those all
Right.
become part of your ground rules.
Okay, and they're really good ground rules. So becoming self-aware, understanding what's your fighting style, but also understanding your partner's fighting style, or whomever the other person is in that relationship, understanding their fighting style. So if I see you walk away, that means don't follow you. I understand. You need a moment. You'll come back and talk to me when you've calmed down. So it's really getting to know each other.
Yes.
Yeah, not just creating relationships quickly and not knowing anything, but really knowing about each other. So we're going to kind of wrap it up with talking about fair fighting step by step.
Well, the first thing you need to ask yourself, what exactly is bothering me? What is the issue? What do I want the other person to do or not do? And, you know, are my feelings right now in proportion to this issue? So first of all, before engaging in any kind of a conflict, know what you want and be able to ask for it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise there's no point in getting into the discussion
Right.
if you can't ask for what you want. So
Yeah, you're
before
going to
getting
leave just as
involved-
frustrated as when you went into the discussion.
So
Okay.
know what's bothering you, know what you want, know that your feelings are in proportion to the issue.
Okay. Okay. And then you talk about knowing what your goals are before you begin.
Yeah, and that's kind of knowing what kind of outcome you want. And so you might, what outcome is acceptable? And this kind of involves, as you think about what you want to ask for, this kind of involves the compromise piece. So thinking through the consequences, it could turn out like this, like that, or like that. What am I willing to accept
Yeah.
if I can't get exactly what I want? And so thinking through consequences and what the outcome might be and what you're willing to accept.
Yeah. Compromise, really important. And also remembering that the idea is not to win. That is usually key to every disagreement. Who's going to win?
Some people are very competitive, and all that's important for them is to win the argument. And when you're doing that, you're not solving the problem.
You're not.
You're-
You end up with both of you end up being losers in it.
Yes, so you have to be able to not think in terms of win, lose, but in terms of solving this problem.
And with leaving both of us with our dignity intact and with mutual respect.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important. And then the other piece to it is setting a time for discussion.
Yeah, and sometimes, you know, it's not a good time at that time when the incident's going on, especially if you're angry or if you don't have privacy or if you need to think it through before you have the discussion. So what people will do is set up a time to have that discussion. You know, if it's during the middle of the week and you're getting dinner and getting homework done and getting the kids in bed and you're tired, that's not the time to do it.
Right.
When your partner walks in the door from work, that's not the
Definitely
time
not
to
the
do it.
time.
So it's important to agree on a time that you can have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And you might even set up like a date night where you have the kids go with
Mm-hmm.
mom and the two of you can sit and talk.
Right.
And you might even want to do that out at a restaurant because
Yeah,
you know
you're
you'll be
less
more civil
likely.
that way.
Yes, to
Or
yell
you
and
might just
scream.
say, you know, on Sunday afternoon when
Mm-hmm.
everything is taken care of and we're not stressed and we don't have anything to do, that's
Right.
when we'll talk about this. So it's very important. These are part of the ground rules, deciding when you're going to have that conversation.
And actually following through on it, because people will schedule the discussion and not follow through, and then this incident comes up again in the future and it's not resolved. So you have to follow through with that appointment to sit there and discuss things.
Yes, setting an appointment for later is not just a way to avoid.
Exactly.
It's a way to set an appointment for later.
And follow through, exactly. And you also talk about inviting the other person to share his or her point of view.
Yeah, and it's about listening and hearing what they have to say. And it doesn't mean you agree with them,
Right.
but you let them say their piece, what they think, what they feel, what they need, and you're not interrupting. And what happens is people will say, well, I'm going to forget what I want to say, so I just blurt it out.
Right.
Well, write it down
Exactly.
so that if you think you're going to forget it, but the other person has the floor and you don't interrupt them. You listen to hear what they have to say.
And you don't listen with the intent of, oh, I hear, but I know what I'm going to respond. This is how I'm going to say this because she's wrong on that or he's wrong. Then you're no longer listening.
And you're listening without judging it. You're not
Exactly.
judging whether they're right or wrong.
You're just
What
hearing their
you're-
point of view.
You're hearing their emotion, their belief. And
Right.
so what happens is people will keep saying what they need to, what they've said. They'll say it over and over and over. Why is that? It's because
Right.
they don't feel heard. They feel like you didn't hear them. So it's important just to say, just to kind of repeat back to them, you're feeling left out
Right.
because I didn't invite you to come with me last week
Yeah.
to some friend's house.
Reflective listening.
And it
at its
doesn't matter
best.
if they're right or wrong.
Right.
You're just letting them know that you heard them.
Mm-hmm.
And that will prevent that when those arguments keep coming up and you keep saying the same
Right.
thing over and over.
And that person will feel safe in entering into a discussion with you because they know that you at least listen and hear them. And that goes along with really trying to take on the other person's perspective, or as we talk about in counseling a lot, walking in the other person's shoe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you know what's important about that is that all of us have had different life experiences.
Yeah.
So we may both be going through the same thing, but you're going to have a different response and a different emotional feeling to that experience than I
Right.
will. And so not everyone is going to respond the same in each instance. So we
yeah.
need to be aware of what the other person's perspective is, even if we don't agree or even if we don't understand it, but
Yeah.
to know that they're approaching that same situation that you are with totally different life experiences.
Yeah.
And so they're going to experience it and interpret it differently than you do.
Right. And it's not a right or wrong, it's
It's
just
not.
that person's perspective on it. Okay. And you talk about proposing specific solutions.
Yes, and so whenever, you know, we know what we want, we're asking for what we want, we need to be able to ask for different things because we're going to negotiate with the other person. What can they give us? They may not be able to give us everything that we want, but maybe we can come up with other solutions. So
Right.
let's say, for instance, that you don't want to go to your spouse's family for Christmas.
Yeah.
You know, what else can you offer? Can you go Christmas Eve? Can you call them? Can you
Right.
go for just dessert? Can you
Yeah.
go for a limited time? Can you both go to your own families and then come back? So what are
Right.
some solutions that are really going to work? And you know, a lot of times we have to come up with 2 or 3 before the other
Yes.
person will be
Yeah.
happy with that. So it's important before you go into any conflict that you know what will resolve it for you. And so you're not going to present your conflict and let the other person solve it. You're
Right.
going to present, here's the issue, and here are some ways I think we can solve it. Which ones will work for you?
Exactly, yeah. And you talk about even going so far as to discuss the advantages and the disadvantages to each proposed solution.
Yes, and so you were gonna, if you talk about the advantages, that's basically just selling it. Here we're just gonna go for
exactly.
dessert, and that's gonna work because, and then
Right.
you say,
Yeah.
all the reasons why you think that's better.
Okay. And finally, being willing to compromise.
It's so important, being able to compromise, and it really allows us to, as we're looking at different options, it allows us to kind of pick and choose
Yes.
of all the different options,
Mhm.
and maybe, and sometimes compromise means we'll do what you want this time and we'll do what I want that
Yeah.
time, and so we'll do that at home with the movies when we want to
Right.
watch a movie. I pick one time, he picks another time, because
Exactly.
there's movies that we just don't enjoy seeing, for each other. And so sometimes compromise involves tweaking the options so that we come to something in the middle, but sometimes it involves you pick one time, I'll pick another
Right.
time. And I know somebody, and they were trying to decide where they were going to put the landscaping in the front yard, and they both wanted to put it in different places, do different things. So they kind of compromised and put it in the middle, but what happened was neither of them was happy with
Yeah.
how the landscaping looked, and so neither person was happy. So that's not necessarily compromising and doing what's in the middle. It's not always the best option
Right.
if neither of you is going to be happy.
Yeah.
So you have to look at what is going to make us both happy, what can
Yeah.
we live with or live without, or
Yeah.
what else can you give me next time, or
Yeah.
taking turns.
Yeah. I give you the landscaping this time. Next time.
I get to purchase the couch.
Exactly. Yeah. We have to selectively choose our battles, definitely, because if we choose the ones that are most significant to us and present them in a respectful way, we can probably get what we want. Yeah, but it's just being fair. So we've learned about all of these things, but what happens when nothing seems to work?
Well, if you've given it your best effort and you've used all of these techniques, then you might need an outside person to come in.
Okay.
And it could be a respected family member, it could be a
Mhm.
pastor of the clergy, it could be a counselor. I mean, that's what we do at Ascension Counseling Center.
Yes.
We talk a lot about, we help people work through
Mm.
a lot of the issues that they're going through, and we help people, parents having conflict with children, and spouses having conflict with each other. And sometimes, people just need like a reality check. Like we'll have people come in and say, am I being totally unreasonable? And they just want a third person to kind of give them some feedback. And so we
Right.
can kind of do that as well, because we're a third party, a neutral party. We don't have any stake in the outcome about what your decision is, but we
Right.
can kind of give you some feedback about, what the issue is that you're talking about. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, what I do and what we all do with couples is we talk about how you're talking about the issue, not the issue.
Right.
So we talk a lot about how to resolve it, and so we can give you skills. We can help you with these skills to develop these
Yeah.
skills that you need to have good conflict resolution skills.
Definitely. We can be the mediators.
Yes.
Because sometimes that's the very thing that's needed. Yeah. And it's to not feel like the relationship can't survive because you're not resolving your conflicts. Sometimes it really does take that third party person to help you out and to teach you how to communicate and how to handle conflict. So thank you, Suzanne. You gave us a lot of great ideas, some good step-by-step ways to resolve conflict and healthy ways.
Good, and we hope that this has been helpful for you. We've given you a lot of good tips and ideas, and they really work. You just have to start practicing them. And with any new skill that we do, we don't necessarily do it perfectly the first time. And so some of these things you're just going to have to practice and keep practicing so
Right.
that you get better and better at it. And you will notice that it makes a difference. Sometimes people will say, I'm willing to do this, but my partner is not. They're kind of stubborn and they really won't do this with me. what we tell people is, is like we talked about earlier, you both get into an argument and it goes exactly the same way. You say the same thing, they say the same thing, it goes back and forth. All it takes is one person to change that script and flip it over. And so if you get out of the habit or the pattern of that, of saying the same thing, if you start handling it different, it forces the other person to handle it differently as well. So as long as you are using these skills, you can coach the other person along and help bring them to change that conversation. And it'll be a lot more satisfying for you and for them.
Yeah, and the relationship wins. It's no loss. Each partner wins in that relationship.
Yes.
So that's a wonderful way. Again, thanks so much,
You're
Suzanne.
welcome.
And thanks to you, our viewers, for spending your time with us for this episode of Ascension Counseling Center's video newsletter. Remember, you can catch replays of the program exclusively on Ascension 21 on the days and times listed on your screen, and anytime on Ascension 21's YouTube channel. We hope today's information will help change your life for the better. That's our goal at Ascension Counseling Center, for our programs to help change lives. Remember, Ascension Counseling Center is here by way of your support. We're funded by a 2-mil property tax millage, which means that $2 from every $1,000 you pay in taxes goes to support our agency so we can provide free and low-cost mental health and substance abuse outpatient services to residents of Ascension. We're located in Gonzales at 1112 Southeast Ascension Complex Boulevard, off Worthy Road, across from the courthouse and right next to the health unit. You can reach us by calling 225-450-1016. You can also find us on the web at ascensionparish.net/MH and on Facebook at Ascension Counseling Center. You can also hear us on KKAY AM 1590 every Tuesday from 10 to 10:30 a.m. Thanks for your support, and until next time, from everyone at Ascension Counseling Center, thank you for watching.
We see a lot of children that are actually being raised by their grandparents. There's so many resources that we can help you with to help you figure out what to do with this child, to help this child understand what his goal in life is. Having one little boy come in and hate his life and have a scowl on his face and not want to be there, and then a month or so later befriend him and come in and smile at me and talk to me and give me a hug, which those children don't do that very often. So by having that hug rewards me more than any paycheck that a person could give me. It's more fulfilling than anything else that job could possibly give me, by seeing a patient or a child or an adult's life completely turned around. Hi, my name is Lisa Lopez, and I'm a nurse at the Ascension Counseling Center.